The dust rose in lazy spirals behind the lone rider as he descended the rocky trail into Dry Creek. It was late September, 1882, and the Wyoming wind carried the first bite of autumn. The man sat easy in his saddle, but there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of constant vigilance. His face, weathered by sun and hardship, bore a jagged scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. Gray eyes, the color of winter storms, surveyed the small frontier town spread before him. Eli Dalton had no intention of staying long. He never did. Dry Creek wasn't much to look at. A collection of weathered buildings huddled along a dirt main street, fighting a losing battle against the endless Wyoming wind. The church steeple, painted white but peeling, stood as the town's highest point. A general store, a smithy, a small hotel, and the inevitable saloon made up the heart of the settlement. Beyond that, scattered houses dotted the landscape like seeds thrown by a careless hand. As Eli guided his horse down Main Street, curtains twitched in windows. A woman gathering laundry paused to stare, then quickly averted her gaze when he looked her way. Two men outside the barber shop stopped their conversation to watch him pass. He was used to it. The scar always drew attention, and strangers weren't particularly welcome in small towns like this. He was almost to the saloon when it happened. A child's scream pierced the afternoon quiet, followed by the thunder of hooves and the rattle of an out-of-control wagon. Eli's head snapped toward the sound. A boy, no more than 6 or 7, stood frozen in the middle of the street as a freight wagon careened toward him. The driver fighting desperately to control his panicked team. Without thought, Eli spurred his horse forward. The world narrowed to the child, the wagon, and the shrinking distance between them. He leaned low, swept the boy up with one arm, and veered sharply aside. The wagon thundered past, close enough that Eli felt the wind of its passage. He set the child down gently on the boardwalk, where a woman, presumably the mother, rushed forward with tears streaming down her face. "Tommy! Oh, Lord! Tommy!" She crushed the boy against her skirts, then looked up at Eli with eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, mister. Thank you so much." Eli touched the brim of his hat and turned away without a word. He could feel the weight of many eyes on him now, but the looks had changed. Curiosity mixed with the suspicion, and perhaps a touch of grudging respect. He tied his horse outside the saloon and pushed through the swinging doors, seeking the shadows within. The Silver Dollar Saloon was like 1,000 others he'd known, dim, reeking of whiskey and tobacco, filled with the quiet desperation of men trying to forget. Eli ordered a whiskey at the bar and asked the bartender, a balding man with impressive sideburns, about work. "Might be some at the Hammond Ranch," the bartender said, polishing a glass with practiced motions. "Though with winter coming, most spreads are letting hands go, not taking them on." He paused, studying Eli with a frank assessment of a man who'd seen plenty of drifters. "You planning on staying long? Long enough to earn supplies for the trail?" Eli replied, "Where you headed?" "Wherever the trail leads." The bartender grunted, recognizing the evasion. "Well, if you need a place to bed down, Mary runs a clean boarding house 2 streets over. Fair prices." Eli nodded his thanks and turned his attention to his whiskey. He'd learned long ago that the less you said, the less people remembered about you. Meanwhile, in the abandoned chapel at the edge of town, Clara Whitmore was fighting her own battle. The building had been empty for 3 years, ever since the new church was built, and Clara had claimed it for her school. The townspeople hadn't exactly approved, but they hadn't stopped her either, at least not at first. "No, Samuel, that's not quite right," she said gently, leaning over the boy's slate. "Remember, the letter B faces the other way, like this." She guided his small hand, helping him form the letter correctly. 22 children sat on makeshift benches, their ages ranging from 5 to 14. It was more than she'd had last week, which was encouraging, but she knew their attendance was fragile. Many parents only let their children come when they could spare them from chores, and some didn't see the value in learning at all. "Miss Whitmore," piped up a girl named Annie. My PA says women shouldn't be teaching. He says it ain't natural. Clara straightened, smoothing her brown wool dress. She was 26, young to be a widow, younger still to be challenging the conventions of a frontier town. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but rebellious curls escaped to frame her face, her green eyes, which her late husband had once compared to spring leaves, met Annie's with calm determination. Your father is entitled to his opinion, Annie, she said, but I believe knowledge belongs to everyone, men and women, rich and poor. Don't you want to be able to read the Bible for yourself? To write letters to family far away? To understand numbers so no one can cheat you? Annie nodded slowly, and Clara smiled. Then let's continue with our lesson. As the afternoon wore on, Clara noticed a disturbance outside. Some of the children were peering out the windows, whispering excitedly. She walked to the door and saw a stranger riding past, a man with a scarred face and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much. Their eyes met for a brief moment across the dusty street. Something in his gaze, a deep weariness, perhaps, or a carefully guarded pain, made her breath catch. Then he looked away and continued toward the saloon. Miss Whitmore, called one of the boys. Did you see him save Tommy Baker? Pulled him right out from under that wagon. So the scarred stranger was already making himself known in Dry Creek. Clara wondered how long he would stay. Men like that, men with shadows in their eyes, rarely lingered anywhere for long. The school day ended as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Clara watched her students scatter, some running eager to return to their chores, others dragging their feet, reluctant to leave the world of letters and numbers behind. She began tidying the chapel, collecting slates and precious pieces of chalk. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the footsteps until they were right outside. The door burst open, and two men stumbled in, reeking of whiskey. Clara recognized them, Jed Holmes and his cousin Pete, troublemakers who spent most of their time drinking and making life miserable for others. Well, Jed slurred, his eyes roving over her in a way that made her skin crawl. The pretty schoolmarm, all alone. Clara lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. The school day is over. Gentlemen, if you have children you'd like to enroll? Pete laughed, an ugly sound. Children? That's a good one. Nah, we're here about you, Miss High and Mighty. You turned down my friend Bill's proposal last month. That wasn't very friendly. I had every right to refuse, Clara said, backing slowly toward the door. Now, please leave. Jed moved to block her path. See, that's the problem with you Eastern women. You think you're too good for us frontier folk. Maybe someone needs to teach you some manners. Clara's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. The only teaching that happens here is reading and arithmetic. Now step aside. Pete grabbed her arm, his grip painful. You need to learn your place, woman. Clara tried to wrench free, but Pete was strong. Jed moved closer, whiskey breath hot on her face. She was preparing to scream when the chapel door flew open again. The scarred stranger stood silhouetted in the doorway, his gray eyes taking in the scene with cold assessment. He didn't speak, didn't threaten. He simply walked forward with a predator's grace. What happened next was over in seconds. Pete released Clara to face this new threat, but he was too slow, too drunk. The stranger's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. Jed rushed forward with a curse, pulling a knife. The stranger sidestepped, caught Jed's wrist, and twisted. The knife clattered to the floor, followed shortly by Jed himself, clutching his arm and moaning. "The lady asked you to leave," the stranger said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, which somehow made it more menacing. Pete struggled to his feet, helping Jed up. They stumbled toward the door, Pete turning to spit. "This ain't over." The stranger's hand moved to his hip, where the handle of a Colt gleamed. "Yes, it is." They fled. Clara stood frozen, her heart still pounding. The stranger turned to her, and she saw concern flicker across his weathered features. "Are you hurt, ma'am?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. He nodded and turned to go, but Clara found herself reaching out, her hand touching his sleeve. "Wait, thank you. Thank you." He paused, looking down at her hand on his arm as if puzzled by the contact. "You should be more careful," he said. "This isn't a safe place for a woman alone." "I can take care of myself," Clara replied, some of her spirit returning. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'm sure you can, ma'am, but men like those don't always fight fair." He gently disengaged from her touch and walked to the door. Clara watched him go, noting the way he moved, the careful awareness of his surroundings. This was a man who'd learned to always watch his back. "I don't even know your name," she called out. He paused at the threshold. "Eli," he said without turning. "Eli Dalton." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone in the chapel with overturned benches and the lingering scent of violence. She began setting things right, her hands shaking slightly. She'd been in Dry Creek for 6 months, and while she'd faced disapproval and cold shoulders, this was the first time she'd faced physical threat. Outside, she could hear voices raised in excitement. Word traveled fast in small towns, and she knew that by evening, everyone would have heard about the incident. What worried her wasn't the gossip. She was used to that. What worried her was what people would say about Eli Dalton being alone with her in the chapel, about him defending her, about the way she'd touched his arm. In towns like Dry Creek, reputation was everything, and hers was already precarious. As she locked the chapel door and began the walk to her small rented room above the general store, Clara didn't notice the faces watching from windows. She didn't see Mrs. Henderson, the pastor's wife, pursing her lips in disapproval, or Mr. Garrett, the mayor, frowning thoughtfully. She didn't see the 2 ranch hands who'd witnessed Eli escorting Pete and Jed from the chapel and were now embellishing the story with each telling. By the time the sun set behind the mountains, casting Dry Creek into purple shadow, the story had grown. Eli Dalton hadn't just defended the schoolmarm. He'd held her in his arms. He'd whispered to her. They'd been alone together for who knows how long before Pete and Jed had interrupted. Something in his room at the boarding house. Eli sat on the narrow bed, cleaning his coat. He'd planned to leave in the morning, but now he wondered if he should stay a few more days, just to make sure those 2 drunks didn't cause more trouble for the schoolmarm. Clara. Her name was Clara Whitmore. He'd overheard it in the saloon. He tried not to think about the way she'd looked at him, not with fear or revulsion at his scarred face, but with gratitude and something else, something that made him remember things better left buried. In the morning, he told himself. He'd leave in the morning, but morning would bring its own complications, as mornings always did in places like Dry Creek, where the wind carried whispers faster than truth, and where a scarred stranger and a determined schoolmarm would find their fates intertwined by the very people who sought to drive them apart. The morning after the incident at the chapel, Eli woke to insistent pounding on his door. Mary, the boarding house proprietor, called through the wood. "Mr. Dalton, the pastor and Mayor Garrett are here to see you. They say it's urgent." Eli dressed quickly, strapping on his gun belt with the practiced ease of a man who'd learned never to be caught unprepared. He found 3 men waiting in Mary's small parlor. Reverend Thompson, a thin man with steel-gray hair and eyes to match. Mayor Garrett, whose prosperous belly spoke of successful merchant dealings. And Sheriff Wade, a competent-looking man who seemed uncomfortable with the proceedings. "Mr. Dalton," the Reverend began without preamble, "we need to discuss what happened yesterday evening." Eli remained standing, his back to the wall where he could see all 3 men and the door. "Nothing happened that concerns the law. Ask the sheriff." Sheriff Wade shifted uncomfortably. "That's what I told them. Pete and Jed were drunk and bothering Miss Whitmore. You intervened. Case closed. Far as I'm concerned, the law of man, perhaps," Reverend Thompson said, his voice taking on the thunderous quality he used for sermons. "But what of God's law? What of propriety? You were seen leaving the chapel with Miss Whitmore. She was disheveled. You were holding her. I wasn't holding anyone, Eli said flatly. Mayor Garrett cleared his throat. Several witnesses saw you embracing Mrs. Henderson was quite specific. Eli's jaw tightened. I steadied her after she was assaulted, that's all. Nevertheless, the Reverend continued, Miss Whitmore's reputation has been compromised. She's a widow, alone in the world, trying to make an honest living. Now people are talking. Then tell them to stop, Eli suggested. It's not that simple. Mayor Garrett said, Miss Whitmore has already faced resistance for her unconventional teaching methods. This scandal could ruin her completely. No decent family will send their children to her school. Eli was beginning to understand where this was heading. What do you want from me? Reverend Thompson straightened, assuming his full moral authority. There's only one honorable solution. You must marry Miss Whitmore. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Eli stared at the three men, certain he'd misheard. Marry her? Because I stopped two drunks from attacking her? Because you were alone with her afterward? The Reverend insisted. Because people saw what they saw. Because in a town like this, appearance matters as much as truth. This is insane, Eli said. Ask Miss Whitmore. She'll tell you nothing improper happened. We already have, Mayor Garrett said quietly. She confirmed your account, but it doesn't matter. The damage is done. Sheriff Wade spoke up reluctantly. Eli, I know this seems unfair, but these are good people trying to protect one of their own. Miss Whitmore. She doesn't deserve to have her life ruined because she was attacked. Neither do I deserve to be forced into marriage. Eli countered. No one's forcing anything, the Reverend said, though his tone suggested otherwise. We're simply explaining the situation. Of course, if you choose to leave town, that's your right. But Miss Whitmore will face the consequences alone, and Pete and Jed have friends, without a protector. The threat was subtle but clear. Eli felt the familiar rage building, the same feeling that had sustained him through war and imprisonment. But underneath it was something else, the memory of Clara Whitmore's green eyes, the way she'd touched his sleeve, the quiet dignity with which she'd faced her attackers. Does Miss Whitmore know about this proposal? He asked. She's waiting at the church, Reverend Thompson said. The ceremony can be performed immediately. The ceremony, Eli repeated. You've already decided. Time is of the essence. Mayor Garrett said, the longer we wait, the more the story grows. Already some are saying things that shouldn't be repeated about a lady. Eli closed his eyes briefly. He'd sworn never to be trapped again, never to let anyone cage him. But he thought of Clara facing the town's judgment alone, thought of Pete and Jed's ugly threats. He'd survived worse prisons than marriage. I need to speak with Miss Whitmore first, he said. Alone. The three men exchanged glances. I suppose that would be acceptable, the Reverend said grudgingly. But Mr. Dalton, understand that leaving town now would be inadvisable. People are watching. Eli didn't respond to the veiled threat. He simply walked past them and out into the morning sun. The church sat on a small rise at the end of Main Street, its new white paint gleaming. Eli found Clara in the front pew, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight despite the weight pressing down on her. She looked up as his footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. Mr. Dalton, she said. Her voice was steady, but he could see the strain around her eyes. I'm sorry. I tried to tell them the truth, but it doesn't matter, Eli interrupted. Truth never does in situations like this. He sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. They want us to marry. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. You don't have to agree to this, he said. I could leave town. In a few weeks, they'll find something else to gossip about. Clara turned to face him fully. And what happens to me in those few weeks? I lose my school, my students, everything I've worked for. Her voice grew stronger. And Pete and Jed? Do you think they'll simply forget? Eli knew she was right. He'd seen it too many times, how quickly a woman alone could be driven to desperate circumstances. "You'd be marrying a stranger," he said. "You know nothing about me." "I know you helped a child," Clara said. "I know you defended me when you could have walked away. That's more than I knew about my first husband when our families arranged our marriage." Her frankness surprised him. "This isn't the same." "No," she agreed. "This is worse. At least then I had the illusion of choice." She stood abruptly, smoothing her skirts. "But I'm tired of being a victim of circumstances. If we must marry, then so be it. I'll make the best of it, as I always have." Eli studied her, the determined set of her jaw, the pride that kept her spine straight even as her world crumbled. "I'm not an easy man to live with," he warned. "I have difficulties. We all have difficulties. Mr. Dalton, the question is whether we face them alone or together." He stood as well, his decision made, not because of the town's threats or moral blackmail, but because of the quiet courage in Clara Whitmore's eyes. "Then let's get this over with." The ceremony was brief and joyless. Reverend Thompson read the vows with an air of grim satisfaction. Mayor Garrett and his wife served as witnesses. Sheriff Wade stood at the back of the church, his hand never far from his gun, whether to prevent Eli from bolting or to stop any interruption. Eli couldn't tell. Clara wore the same brown dress from the day before. Eli hadn't shaved, hadn't changed his travel-worn clothes. They spoke their vows in monotones, the words meaningless sounds that bound them nonetheless. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, neither moved to seal the union with a kiss. "I'll have my things sent to your place," Clara said as they signed the register. "I don't have a place," Eli replied. "Just a room at the boarding house." Mayor Garrett cleared his throat. "Actually, there's the old Carson cabin out by Willow Ridge. It's been empty since Jim Carson died last spring. It's rough, but it's shelter. You can use it." Of course they had it all planned, Eli thought bitterly. Cage the wild animal and the schoolmarm together. Far enough from town to avoid scandal, but close enough to keep watch. An hour later, Eli drove a borrowed wagon loaded with Clara's few possessions toward Willow Ridge. She sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The cabin, when it came into view, was indeed rough. A single room with a lean-to addition, a small barn that had seen better days, and a well that would need cleaning. "It needs work," Clara said, her teacher's voice carefully neutral. "It needs everything," Eli corrected. They unloaded in silence. Clara's possessions were heartbreakingly few: a trunk of clothes, a box of books, her precious teaching supplies, and a photograph in a silver frame that she quickly tucked away. Eli had even less: saddlebags, bedroll, rifle, and the ghosts he carried. As the sun began to set, Clara prepared a simple meal from the supplies the mayor's wife had grudgingly provided. They ate at the rough table, the only sounds the scrape of forks on tin plates and the wind testing the cabin's walls. "I'll sleep in the barn," Eli said when the meal was done. Clara looked up sharply. "That's not necessary." "It is." He stood, gathering his bedroll. "This marriage may be legal, but it's not. It doesn't have to be anything more. You keep your life. I'll keep mine. When enough time has passed, we can figure out something more permanent." "You mean divorce?" Clara's voice was carefully neutral. "Or I could just leave. Wouldn't be the first husband to head west and never return." Clara stood as well, beginning to clear the dishes. "And leave me to explain, to face the consequences alone again." "I didn't mean—" "No, you're right," she interrupted. "We should keep things separate, but you'll sleep inside. The nights are getting cold, and I won't have your death on my conscience. You can have the lean-to room." It wasn't a question. Eli recognized the tone, the same one she probably used with stubborn students. Despite everything, he almost smiled. That first night set the pattern for the days that followed. They moved around each other like wary animals sharing a territory. Eli threw himself into repairs, patching the roof, reinforcing the barn, cleaning the well. Clara established her own routine, organizing the household, preparing for her students, maintaining a determined normalcy. But the nights were different. The nights brought challenges neither had anticipated. It started the third night. Clara woke to sounds of distress from the lean-to, muttering, then shouting, then a crash as something fell. She lay frozen, uncertain, until a cry of pure anguish drove her from bed. She found Eli tangled in his blankets, eyes open but unseeing, fighting enemies only he could see. "No! Get down! Get down! Damn you!" His voice was raw, desperate. "I can't. There's too many. Williams! Williams! Where?" Clara didn't think. She knelt beside him, catching his flailing hands. "Eli! Eli! Wake up! You're safe! You're in Wyoming! The war is over!" His hands gripped hers with painful force. His eyes focused slowly, confusion replacing terror. "Clara? Yes." "You were dreaming." He released her hands as if burned, scrambling back against the wall. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. Don't apologize." She sat back on her heels, studying him. Sweat beaded his forehead, and his hands shook slightly. "How often does this happen?" "Go back to bed," he said, not answering. "Eli, please." The word was forced out, as if asking for anything was physically painful. "Just go." Clara rose slowly. At the doorway, she paused. "My husband, my first husband, had nightmares after Antietam. You're not alone in this." She left before he could respond, but she heard his ragged breathing long into the night. The next morning, neither mentioned the incident, but something had shifted. The wary distance remained, but underneath was a thread of understanding, fragile as spider's silk. A week into their marriage, Clara returned to teaching. The old chapel had been officially closed to her, Reverend Thompson's doing, so she held classes in their barn. Only 5 students came that first day, their parents brave or desperate enough to defy town opinion. Eli watched from the cabin doorway as Clara transformed the barn into a classroom. Her smile never wavered, even when little Annie reported that her father had forbidden her to come. Clara taught those 5 with the same passion she'd have shown 50, and Eli found himself drawn to the sound of young voices reciting letters and numbers. That night, over their usual silent dinner, Clara spoke. "Thank you for letting me use the barn." Eli shrugged. "It's your barn, too. Legally, perhaps, but we both know the truth of our situation." He set down his fork. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry you're trapped here with me? I want you to stop acting like you're the only one who gave something up." Clara said sharply, "Yes, you were forced into this marriage. So was I. But I had a life too. Mr. Dalton, plans, dreams. They didn't include being wed to a man who treats me like I'm invisible. I'm trying to give you space. I don't need space. I need something, conversation, acknowledgement that I exist beyond mealtimes." She stood abruptly. "Forget it. I'm being foolish." She started to turn away, but Eli caught her wrist gently. "Wait, you're right. It's been a long time since I've had to consider anyone else." He released her, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how to do this. Any of it." Clara sat back down slowly. "Neither do I, but perhaps we could try. Just talking sometimes." "About what?" "Anything. Everything. Where you're from. Where I'm from. Why we both ended up in this godforsaken place." She managed a small smile. "My first husband and I barely knew each other when we married, but we learned, before he died. We'd become friends, at least." "How did he die?" Eli asked, surprising himself with the question. "Fever. On the way out here." Clara's voice was steady, but her eyes held old pain. "He'd always dreamed of the frontier, open land, fresh starts. He died 2 days from Fort Laramie. Why didn't you go back east? With what money? And to what?" She shook her head. "I had enough to get to the nearest town and a skill people needed, even if they didn't want to admit it. So here I am, teaching children in a barn, married to a stranger," Eli said bitterly, "making the best of what life offers." Clara corrected. "It's all any of us can do." They sat in silence for a moment, but it was different from their usual uncomfortable quiet. This had texture, possibility. "I was at Andersonville," Eli said suddenly. "That's where I got this." He gestured to his scar. Guard's bayonet when I tried to stop him from beating a sick man. Clara didn't gasp or offer sympathy. She simply nodded. Waiting. 13 months, he continued. Came out weighing 90 pounds and mad at the world. Been drifting ever since. 7 years of not staying anywhere long enough to matter. Until now, Clara said softly. Until now, he agreed, though he couldn't say why this felt different. That night, when the nightmares came, Clara was ready. She didn't enter his room, but she sat outside the door, humming quietly. Hymns, folk songs, anything to provide an anchor to the present. When morning came, Eli found a cup of coffee waiting on the table. Still warm, and Clara already in the barn preparing for her students. 8 showed up that day. Word was spreading that the lessons continued, scandal or no scandal. And when Pete and Jed appeared at the edge of the property, obviously drunk and looking for trouble, they found Eli waiting on the porch, rifle across his knees. The 2 men retreated without a word. "You didn't have to do that," Clara said that evening. "Yes, I did." Eli was cleaning his rifle, the familiar action soothing. "It's what husbands do." Clara looked at him for a long moment. "Is that what you are now, my husband?" "According to the law and God, apparently. That's not what I asked." Eli set down the rifle, meeting her green eyes. "I don't know what I am, but I know those men won't bother you while I'm here. That has to count for something." "It does," Clara said. "It counts for a great deal." Later, as Clara prepared for bed in the main room and Eli in his lean-to, she called out, "Eli, thank you, for today, for the students." "Good night, Clara," was all he said. But for the first time, there was warmth in it. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled across the ridges, winter announcing its approach. Inside the rough cabin, 2 damaged souls began the slow, uncertain process of building something neither had expected. A partnership born of necessity, but growing into something more. Trust, perhaps. Understanding. Maybe, eventually, something that might even be called home. But that was still to come. For now, there was only the wind, the night, and 2 people learning that being alone together was different from being alone. 3 weeks into their strange marriage, the whispers from town grew louder. Clara tried to ignore them when she went for supplies, but the way conversations stopped when she entered the general store, the way women pulled their skirts aside when she passed, it all spoke volumes. "That Dalton woman thinks she's too good for us." She overheard Mrs. Henderson saying, "Marrying that scarred drifter just to keep her position, and still teaching those children improper ideas." "My Robert came home yesterday talking about the stars," another woman complained. Said Miss Clara, "Excuse me, Mrs. Dalton told him the earth moves around the sun." Such nonsense. Clara kept her head high as she purchased flour and coffee, but her hands trembled as she counted out coins. Mr. Morrison, the shopkeeper, took her money without meeting her eyes. "Mrs. Dalton," he said quietly as she turned to leave. "Perhaps it would be better if you sent your husband for supplies. Less complicated. I'm perfectly capable of buying flour. Mr. Morrison." Clara replied, "That's not what I mean, and you know it." His voice dropped further. "People are talking about that barn school of yours, about your husband. Some are saying he's wanted somewhere, that the scar is from a rope that didn't finish the job. People say many things, few of them true. True or not, words have power. The town council meets next week. There's talk of formal action about your teaching." He glanced around nervously. "I'm trying to help." Clara left without another word, her basket heavy with more than just supplies. She found Eli working on the fence, his shirt damp with sweat despite the cool October air. He looked up as she approached, and something in her face made him straighten. "What happened?" "Nothing new," Clara said, setting down the basket harder than necessary. Just the good people of Dry Creek sharing their opinions. Eli's jaw tightened. Did someone threaten you? Not directly, but the town council plans to discuss my teaching. She laughed bitterly. Formal action. Morrison said, as if teaching children to read is a crime. Maybe you should stop for a while. Let things settle. Clara whirled on him, eyes flashing. Stop? Give up the only thing I have left? The only reason I get up each morning? I didn't mean. Yes, you did. It's what everyone wants. For me to disappear quietly, to stop making them uncomfortable with my unseemly education and ideas. She was shaking now. Weeks of suppressed frustration boiling over. Well, I won't. They forced me into this marriage, trapped me here, but I won't let them take my purpose too. Eli dropped his hammer and crossed to her, catching her shoulders gently. Clara, look at me. She did, tears of rage threatening to spill. I'm tired, Eli, so tired of fighting for every small thing. Then let me help, he said quietly. Tell me what you need. The simple offer broke something in her. The tears came then, and without thinking, she leaned into him. He stiffened for a moment, then slowly, carefully, put his arms around her. They stood like that in the autumn sun, Clara crying out her frustration while Eli held her with the awkward care of a man unaccustomed to providing comfort. We're leaving, he said suddenly. Clara pulled back. What? Get what you need for the students. We're going somewhere they can't corner you with their small-minded fears. He released her. Decision made. I know a place. An hour later, Clara found herself on horseback for the first time in years, following Eli up a winding trail into the hills. Her students' books and slates were packed in saddlebags, along with food and water. The path was rough, barely visible in places, but Eli navigated with sure knowledge. Where are we going? Clara called out. You'll see. They climbed for another hour, the town shrinking below them until it was just a collection of matchbox buildings. The trail opened suddenly onto a meadow sheltered by peaks, with a clear stream running through it. But it was the view that stole Clara's breath. The entire valley spread below, mountains rising in every direction, the sky so vast it seemed to press down with its immensity. It's beautiful, she whispered. Found it my second day here, Eli said, dismounting. Come up when the town feels too close. Clara slid from her horse, turning in a slow circle. Why did you bring me here? Because you needed to remember there's more than their narrow minds and petty fears. He unpacked the teaching supplies. And because if you're going to teach, might as well do it somewhere worth being. The children can't climb up here every day, Clara pointed out, though she was smiling. Not every day, but sometimes, when you need to show them something bigger than what the town offers. He spread a blanket on the grass. For now, though, you can teach me. You never had much schooling, can read some, write less. He sat on the blanket, looking up at her with a mixture of challenge and vulnerability. Unless you think I'm too old to learn. Clara sank down beside him, touched beyond words. Never too old, she managed. We'll start with your name. She pulled out a slate and chalk, writing in careful letters, Eli Dalton. Your turn. His large hands were clumsy with the chalk, but he copied each letter with focused determination. They worked until the light began to fade. Clara teaching, Eli learning, the vast sky their only witness. As they packed up, a chill wind swept across the meadow. Clara shivered, and without thinking, Eli pulled off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so unconsciously protective, that both of them froze. Thank you, Clara said softly. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Eli looked at the darkening sky, frowning. Storm's coming fast. We won't make it back before it hits. What do we do? There's a cave near here. We can wait it out. The rain started as they reached the cave. A shallow overhang, really, but deep enough to shelter them and the horses. Eli gathered dead wood from the protected areas and soon had a small fire going. They sat close to it, watching the rain sheet down beyond their shelter. Tell me about before, Clara said suddenly, Before the war, what were you like? Eli was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Different, he finally said. Had a farm in Missouri. Nothing big, but it was mine. Had plans. He stared into the fire. Funny how you can map out a whole life and have it blown apart in minutes. What kind of plans? The usual. Good crops. Maybe a wife, children, Sunday dinners and harvest dances. His voice was distant. Young man's dreams. You're not old now. Clara said, aren't I? He turned to look at her, firelight dancing across his scarred face. Feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes since then. Clara reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. Her fingers traced the scar gently. How did you really get this? Told you, Andersonville. The whole truth. She pressed. He caught her hand but didn't push it away. Guard named Mitchell, liked to hurt people, had a young boy. Couldn't have been more than 16. Dying of fever. Mitchell decided he was faking, started beating him with a rifle butt. His grip on her hand tightened. I stopped him. He didn't like that. You saved the boy? For 2 more days. Eli's voice was flat. He died anyway. They all died anyway. Not all, Clara said. You survived. Did I? He released her hand, turning back to the fire. Sometimes I wonder. Clara moved closer, until their shoulders touched. You saved Tommy Baker. You saved me. That's not the action of a dead man. Maybe. He was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you remarry after your husband died? Real marriage? I mean, not this forced arrangement. Who says I didn't try? Clara pulled his jacket tighter around her. I had offers back in Philadelphia before I came west. Safe men with safe lives who wanted a proper wife for their proper homes. Why didn't you accept? Because I'd already had proper. James was a good man, but our marriage was what was expected. Polite conversation, separate bedrooms, scheduled visits. She laughed softly. He was horrified when I asked to help with the accounts. Scandalized when I read anything beyond ladies' magazines. But you loved him? I respected him, cared for him. But love? She considered. I'm not sure I knew what that meant then. Maybe I still don't. The rain increased, drumming against the rocks. The fire cast moving shadows on the cave walls, in the enclosed space. Clara was acutely aware of Eli's presence, the warmth of his shoulder against hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Clara, he said quietly, that day in town, when Morrison was talking to you, were there others? Has anyone else threatened you? Threatened is a strong word. Has anyone else made you feel unsafe? She thought of the looks, the whispers, the way some men's eyes lingered too long. It doesn't matter. It does to me. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her look at him. Why? Because you're... He stopped, struggled, started again. Because you're under my protection now. That means something to me, even if this marriage doesn't mean what it should. What should it mean? Their eyes met and held. The cave suddenly felt smaller, the air charged with more than storm electricity. Eli lifted his hand to her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Clara, he said, her name a question and answer both. She leaned into his touch. I know. The kiss was inevitable as thunder, soft at first, tentative. 2 lonely people finding unexpected solace. Then Clara's hands tangled in his hair, and Eli pulled her closer, and soft became something else entirely, desperate, hungry, alive. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. We shouldn't, Eli said raggedly. Why? Clara challenged. Because the marriage was forced? Because we're supposed to be strangers? We're not strangers anymore. Eli, I'm broken, he said. The nightmares, the anger. You don't know what you're asking. Don't I? She took his face in both hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm asking for truth between us, for something real in all this pretense. Is that so wrong? He turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss there. No, God help me, no! The storm raged outside, but in the cave's shelter, 2 damaged souls found a different kind of refuge. The fire burned down to embers as they discovered each other, not the desperate coupling of strangers, but the careful exploration of two people learning to trust. Every touch was a question, every response an affirmation. Afterward, they lay entwined on the blanket, Clara's head on Eli's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know." His arms tightened around her. "But I'm not letting you face those bastards alone anymore." "Language, Mr. Dalton," she murmured, but there was a smile in it. "Mrs. Dalton," he corrected, and felt her smile against his chest. The storm passed near midnight. They dressed in comfortable silence, packed up their things. The ride back was quiet, but it was a different quiet than before, charged with possibility rather than tension. As they approached the cabin, Eli spoke. "About what happened." "Don't," Clara interrupted. "Don't apologize or analyze or retreat. Not tonight. We can face reality tomorrow. Tonight, just let it be." He nodded, understanding. Inside the cabin, instead of heading to his lean-to, he hesitated. Clara held out her hand. "Stay," she said simply. He took her hand. In the morning, everything would be complicated again. The town would still gossip. The council would still meet. Their marriage would still be a cage they'd been forced into. But for tonight, in the darkness of their rough cabin, they were just Eli and Clara, two people who'd found something unexpected in each other. Something that might, given time and courage, grow into the kind of love neither had dared hope for. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, and its mate answered. The sound echoed across the ridges, wild and free and unashamed. Inside, Clara curved into Eli's warmth, his arms secure around her, and thought that perhaps being trapped wasn't the worst thing after all. Not if you were trapped with the right person. Not if the cage could become a home. The morning after the storm, they moved around each other with new awareness. Every accidental touch sent ripples of memory through them. The cave, the firelight, the discovery of each other. But with daylight came the return of reality, and with it, uncertainty. "I should check the fence lines," Eli said over breakfast, not quite meeting her eyes. "Storm might have brought some down. I have students coming," Clara replied, equally focused on her coffee. "The Turner children and Mary Sawyer." They were saved from further awkwardness by hoofbeats in the yard. Eli was at the door immediately, hand on his gun. Mayor Garrett sat on his horse, accompanied by Reverend Thompson and two other men from the town council. "Dalton," Garrett said without dismounting, "we need to discuss your wife's teaching." "My wife's teaching is none of your concern," Eli replied, stepping onto the porch. "It is when she's filling children's heads with nonsense." One of the other men said, Walter Hutchins, who owned the largest ranch in the valley. "My boy came home talking about the earth being round, like a ball." Clara appeared beside Eli. "Because it is round. Mr. Hutchins, that's not opinion. It's scientific fact. Science." Reverend Thompson spat the word. "Another word for godlessness. The Bible speaks of the four corners of the earth. Young woman." "The Bible also speaks in metaphor and poetry," Clara countered. "Would you have me teach your children that the moon is literally made of cheese because someone used it as a comparison?" "What I'd have," Hutchins said coldly, "is for you to stop teaching entirely. It's not natural, a woman filling children's heads with ideas, especially a woman of your reputation." Eli stepped forward, but Clara caught his arm. "My reputation?" she asked calmly. "Do you mean the one your gossip created? The scandal you manufactured to force this marriage?" "Nobody forced anything," Garrett said uncomfortably. "We merely pointed out the proprieties." "You threatened us," Eli cut in. "Made it clear what would happen if we didn't comply. And now you're here to threaten again." "Not threaten," Thompson said. "Command. By the authority vested in the town council, you are hereby ordered to cease all teaching activities. The barn school is closed." "By what legal authority?" Clara demanded. "This is our property. These are private lessons." "By the authority of common decency," Hutchins said. "Close it down. Or we will. Try it, Eli said quietly. The menace in his voice made the horses shift nervously. Garrett held up a hand. No need for unpleasantness. Mrs. Dalton, surely you can see the wisdom in stepping back. Find more. Appropriate activities, sewing circles, perhaps church socials. I see the wisdom in educating children. Clara replied, I see the value in teaching them to think, to question, to understand their world. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why. 1 week, Thompson said. You have 1 week to close the school voluntarily. After that, he let the threat hang. They wheeled their horses and left, dust rising in their wake. Clara stood rigid, hands clenched at her sides. Eli watched them go, his mind already cataloging defensive positions, lines of sight. They mean it, Clara said quietly. They'll come. Let 'em. She turned to him. Eli, you can't fight the whole town. Watch me. No. She touched his face, felt the tension in his jaw. No more violence on my account. There has to be another way. Before he could respond, her students began arriving. The Turner boys, aged 8 and 10, with their slate tablets clutched tight, little Mary Sawyer on her father's wagon. He tipped his hat to Clara but didn't linger, not wanting to be seen. Throughout the morning, a handful of others trickled in, their parents brave or desperate enough to defy the council's wishes. Eli worked nearby, close enough to watch, to protect if needed. He found himself drawn to Clara's voice as she taught, patient and clear. She made learning seem like an adventure, not a chore. When young Tom Turner struggled with his letters, she invented a story about each one. When Mary grew frustrated with numbers, Clara used pebbles and sticks to make it real. Mr. Eli, Mary called during their noon break. Miss Clara says you're learning letters too. We could practice together. Eli glanced at Clara, who smiled encouragingly. I suppose we could, he said gruffly. Soon he was sitting cross-legged in the barn, Mary on one side and Tom on the other. All three bent over slates. Clara watched, her heart unexpectedly full. This scarred, dangerous man letting children teach him. It was a sight she'd never imagined. The afternoon brought more visitors, but not students. Sarah Patterson arrived with her daughter Lucy, both looking determined. Mrs. Dalton, Sarah said, I heard what the council said. It's not right. Mrs. Patterson, I don't want to cause trouble for your family. You're not the one causing trouble. Sarah's chin lifted. Lucy's learned more in 3 weeks with you than in a year of the Reverend's Sunday lessons. I want her to keep learning. So do I, said another voice. Martha Brennan walked up, her 3 children in tow. Teaching our children to think isn't a crime. By evening, 7 women had come to express support. It wasn't the whole town, wasn't even most of it, but it was a start. They organized a schedule, whose children would come when, who could provide supplies, who would watch for council interference. That night, as Clara prepared supper, she hummed, the first time Eli had heard her do so outside his nightmares. You're happy, he observed. I'm hopeful, she corrected. Those women today, I'm not alone. I thought I was, but I'm not. You were never alone, Eli said quietly. She turned to him, and the look that passed between them was loaded with meaning. The memory of the cave hung in the air, unspoken but present. About last night, Clara began. You said not to analyze it. That was last night, today. She set down her cooking spoon, faced him fully. Today I need to know what it meant, to you. Eli was quiet for a long moment. I've been empty for 7 years, he finally said. Dead inside, or close enough, last night. It was like remembering I could feel things, want things. He met her eyes. Want someone. But wanting and having are different things. I'm still who I am. Clara, still broken. The nightmares won't stop. The anger won't just disappear. You deserve better than what I am. Clara crossed to him, framing his face with her hands. What if I don't want better? What if I want you? Then you're a fool, he said roughly. Perhaps But I'm your fool. Your wife. That has to mean something. It means everything, he admitted. That's what terrifies me? She kissed him then, soft and sure. When they parted, she smiled. Good. You should be terrified. I'm quite formidable when I set my mind to something. I'm beginning to see that. They came together again that night, not with the desperate urgency of the cave, but with deliberate choice. In their rough bed, they mapped each other's scars, his from war and prison, hers from loss and loneliness. They spoke with touches, with sighs, with the careful attention of two people learning to trust their unexpected fortune. Afterward, Clara traced patterns on his chest. Will you tell me about the nightmares? What you see? Eli tensed, but her touch soothed him. Andersonville mostly. Sometimes battles, friends dying, enemies too, boys who should have been home helping with harvest, not bleeding out in some field. Is it always war? No, sometimes it's after. The emptiness, walking through a world that kept spinning while we were gone, trying to find a place in it. He caught her hand. I didn't find one, not until a stubborn schoolteacher refused to be scared of me. Clara raised up on one elbow. Is that what you think, that I wasn't scared? Were you? Terrified, she admitted. Not of you, never of you, but of what you made me feel, of wanting something I thought I'd buried with James. What did I make you feel? Alive, she said simply. For the first time in 2 years, truly alive. They lay in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds. Then Clara spoke again. The council will come. Maybe not in a week, but soon. I know. I won't stop teaching. I know that too. So what do we do? Eli pulled her closer. We prepare. We gather allies. We make it clear that threatening you means threatening me, and I'm not a man to threaten lightly. You can't shoot the town council, Eli. Can't I? He felt her swat his chest and almost smiled. Fine, but I can make them think twice. Your women supporters? Do any of their husbands have influence? Clara considered. Tom Patterson is well respected. Martha's husband owns the lumber mill. If we could convince them. Then we work on that. Meanwhile, we make this place more defensible. Clear sight lines. Secure the barn better. His mind was already working. The tactical planning that had kept him alive through war. And you keep teaching. Show them their threats mean nothing. Together? Clara asked. Together, he confirmed. Outside, clouds obscured the stars, promising more rain. But inside their cabin, two people who'd been forced together by circumstance chose each other freely. It wasn't the marriage either had imagined in their youth, not the farm wife and Sunday dinners Eli had once dreamed of, not the respectable partnership Clara had known with James. It was something harder, fiercer, forged in adversity and sealed in defiance of those who had caged them. But it was theirs, and it was real, and that was enough. Clara fell asleep first, secure in Eli's arms. He lay awake longer, marveling at the trust she showed, the peace on her face. He'd told her he was broken, and he was, but maybe, with her help, he could build something new from the pieces. Maybe they both could. When sleep finally took him, the nightmares stayed away. And in the morning, when Clara woke to find him still beside her, still holding her, she smiled and pressed a kiss to his scarred cheek. Good morning, husband, she whispered. Good morning, wife, he replied, and meant it in ways the forced ceremony never could have made real. They rose to face another day of defiance, of teaching, of building a life together despite those who would tear it down. The week's deadline loomed, but they would meet it standing side by side. Whatever came, they would face it together. After all, they'd already survived the worst. Being alone, everything else was just weather. Winter arrived early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with a fury that matched the town's growing hostility. The first heavy snow fell in late October, blanketing the valley in white and making the trail to their cabin treacherous. But still the children came. their parents more determined than ever to see them educated despite the council's threats. Eli had spent the week fortifying their position, not just physically, though he'd reinforced the barn doors and cleared better sight lines around the property. He'd also ridden to neighboring homesteads, talking to men who owed him nothing but listened anyway. His reputation as the man who'd saved Tommy Baker carried weight, as did his quiet intensity when he spoke of protecting what was his. "My wife teaches children to read and write." He'd say simply, "Nothing more, nothing less. Anyone who tries to stop her will answer to me." Some men nodded understanding. Others looked away, unwilling to challenge the council. But a few, Tom Patterson, Joseph Brennan, even old Henrik Swanson, who rarely involved himself in town politics, promised to think on it. The morning the council's deadline expired, Eli was chopping wood when he heard them coming. The rhythmic sound of hooves on frozen ground. Too many to be students arriving for lessons. He buried the axe in the chopping block and walked to where his rifle leaned against the cabin wall. "Eli!" Clara called from inside, her voice tight. "They're here." "I know. Stay inside." "No." She emerged wearing her teaching dress, chin high. "I won't hide." The group that rode into their yard was larger than before. Reverend Thompson, Mayor Garrett, Walter Hutchins, and 6 other men. Some carried rifles, though they kept them across their saddles. For now. "Mrs. Dalton," Thompson began without preamble. "The week has passed. We've come to ensure you've complied with the council's directive." "I have not," Clara said clearly. "I have 6 students in the barn right now, learning arithmetic. Would you like to observe?" Hutchins' face darkened. "This is not a joke. Woman." "No," Eli said, stepping forward. "It's not." He'd positioned himself between Clara and the mounted men, rifle loose in his hands. "My wife runs a school on our property. Unless you have legal authority, real legal authority, not your council's opinions, you need to leave. We have all the authority we need." Thompson declared, "The moral authority of this community." "Morality." Clara laughed, the sound bitter. "From men who forced a marriage to cover their own gossip, who threaten a woman for teaching children. You wouldn't know morality if it bit you. Reverend..." "Silence." Thompson's face flushed. "You've corrupted enough with your Eastern ideas and godless teaching. It ends now." "Make it end," Eli said quietly. The click of him cocking his rifle was loud in the cold air. "You'd shoot us?" Garrett asked, genuinely shocked. "Over this? I'd shoot any man who threatens my wife. Question is, which one of you wants to be first?" The tension stretched taut. Horses shifted nervously. Then, unexpected, came the sound of wagon wheels. Everyone turned to see 3 wagons approaching, loaded with people. Tom Patterson drove the first, his wife Sarah beside him. Joseph Brennan handled the second, but it was the third that made the council members mutter uneasily. Judge Arthur Craddock from the county seat, accompanied by Marshal Sam Whelan. "Gentlemen," the judge called out as his wagon stopped. "Having a meeting without proper notice? That's not very democratic." "Judge Craddock," Thompson stammered. "This is a local matter." "Is it?" The judge climbed down, helped by the marshal. He was an older man, but his eyes were sharp. "I received some interesting letters this week. Seems there's a question about the legal authority to close a private school on private property." Clara glanced at Sarah Patterson, who gave a small nod. The women had been busy with more than just organizing students. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm curious about this forced marriage I've been hearing about. Coercion into matrimony is a serious matter. Marshal Whelan might need to investigate." "No one forced anything," Garrett said quickly. "We simply pointed out what would happen if they didn't comply." The judge finished. "Yes, Mrs. Patterson's letter was quite detailed. Names, dates, specific threats made." He looked at Thompson. "Reverend, did you or did you not tell Mr. Dalton that leaving town would be inadvisable?" Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "And Mr. Hutchins, did you or did you not suggest that Mrs. Dalton would face consequences if she refused marriage?" "This is ridiculous," Hutchins blustered. "We were protecting her reputation." By destroying it, Clara stepped forward, emboldened. By spreading lies and forcing me into marriage with a stranger. That stranger seems to have worked out well enough for you, someone muttered, earning a dark look from Eli. That's enough, Judge Craddock said. Here's what's going to happen. Mrs. Dalton will continue teaching if she chooses. It's her legal right on her own property. Any interference will be met with the full force of the law. Is that clear? You can't, Thompson started. I can and I am. The judge's voice hardened. And Reverend, if I hear one more word about forced marriages or threatened women in this town, you'll be explaining yourself to the territorial governor. He takes a dim view of such things. The council members exchanged unhappy looks. Finally, Garrett spoke. We understand. Judge. Good. Then I suggest you gentlemen return to town. Marshal Whelan and I will be staying a few days to ensure everything remains peaceful. The council left in sullen silence. As the last horse disappeared down the trail, Clara sagged against Eli. It's over. For now, Tom Patterson said, approaching. Sarah and the other women thought the judge should know what's been happening. He was concerned. Thank you, Clara said, tears threatening. Thank you all. Don't thank us yet, Sarah warned. They'll be angry. This isn't over, just postponed. But for now, it was enough. The students emerged from the barn, wide-eyed at the confrontation they'd witnessed through cracks in the walls. Clara returned to teaching, her hands shaking only slightly. Eli resumed his wood chopping, but kept the rifle close. That night, as they lay together, Clara traced the tension in his shoulders. You would have shot them. Yes. For me? For us, he corrected. For the right to live our lives without their interference. She was quiet for a moment. I've never had anyone willing to fight for me before. You've never been mine before, Eli said simply. The word hung between them. Mine. Possessive. Protective. Profound. Clara turned in his arms, kissing him deeply. They came together with quiet intensity, aware of how close they'd come to losing what they'd found. Later, Eli rose to stoke the fire. The wind howled outside, driving snow against the windows. When he returned to bed, Clara was shivering. It's getting colder. Winter's barely started, he warned. Gets worse before it gets better. I know. She pressed against him, seeking warmth. Eli, what if we can't last? What if the snows get too deep for students to come? What if... Then we survive until spring, he interrupted. Together. The next weeks tested that resolve. Blizzards swept through the valley, sometimes lasting days. The woodpile shrank faster than expected. Food supplies, calculated for one person living simply, stretched thin for two. Eli hunted when weather allowed, but game was scarce, driven to lower elevations by the harsh conditions. One particularly brutal night, with the wind screaming like a living thing and snow piling against the door, Eli went out to check the horses. He'd been gone too long when Clara heard a crash from the barn. She wrapped herself in every layer she could find and fought her way through the storm. She found him on the barn floor, barely conscious, a gash on his forehead where a loose board, torn free by the wind, had struck him. Eli! His skin was ice cold, his lips blue. Clara dragged him toward the house, her slight frame straining against his weight in the wind. She got him inside, to the fire, stripping his wet clothes with desperate efficiency. Talk to me, she pleaded, piling blankets on him. Eli, please! His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Clara? I'm here. You're safe. But he wasn't seeing her. Not really. Too cold, he mumbled. Williams is too cold. Gotta get him warm. The delirium lasted hours. Clara held him, shared her warmth, listened to him relive horrors from Andersonville, friends freezing to death, the desperate sharing of threadbare blankets, the guards laughing as men died. I couldn't save them, he whispered at one point, tears on his scarred face. Couldn't save any of them. You saved yourself, Clara told him. You survived. You came home. No home, he muttered. Never any home. You have a home now, she insisted. With me. You're home, Eli. Whether her words reached him or his body simply fought off the cold. Slowly, his skin warmed. His breathing steadied. The delirium faded, replaced by exhausted sleep. Clara stayed awake, standing guard against the cold and the nightmares both. When he woke fully the next morning, he found her still holding him. Clara? Thank God. She examined the cut on his forehead. How do you feel? Like a barn fell on me. He tried to sit up, winced. What happened? You were gone too long. I found you in the barn. Her voice caught. I thought I was going to lose you. He touched her face, felt the exhaustion there. Take more than a bump on the head to get rid of me. It wasn't just that. The cold, the memories. She told him what he'd said in his delirium. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Williams was my friend. Died 3 feet from me in Andersonville. Froze to death in the night. I woke up next to a corpse. He closed his eyes. Sometimes I still do. Clara held him tighter. I'm sorry. Don't be. You brought me back. Again. He tilted her chin up. You keep doing that, pulling me out of the cold. They stayed by the fire all day. Clara reading to him from her precious books. Eli teaching her card games he'd learned in the war. The storm raged on, but inside their small cabin, they'd created their own warmth. That night, as the wind finally began to die, Eli spoke into the darkness. Clara, what you said about home. Yes? You're right. This is home. You're home. He paused, gathering courage for words that came hard. I love you. Thought you should know, in case another barn tries to kill me. Clara's breath caught. They'd shared their bodies, their fears, their pasts. But not this word. Not yet. I love you too, she whispered. Lord help me, I do. Poor judgment on your part, he said. But she could hear the smile. The poorest. She agreed, and kissed him. Outside, the blizzard spent its fury, leaving behind a world transformed by white. They'd survived the council's threats, survived the storm, survived the testing of their strange marriage. Winter was far from over. There would be more cold nights, more hunger, more challenges from the town, but they would face them together. No longer 2 people forced into marriage, but 2 people who'd chosen each other. In the morning, they'd dig out, tend the horses, stretch their supplies further. Clara would find ways to continue teaching despite the weather. Eli would hunt, repair storm damage, stand guard against those who wished them harm. They'd live the life they'd cobbled together from necessity and stubbornness and unexpected love. But tonight, they held each other in the firelight, warm and whole and home. Spring came slowly to the Wyoming territory, creeping down from the mountains in fits and starts. By March, the worst of the winter had passed, though snow still clung to the shadows and frost painted the windows each morning. It was on such a morning that Clara first suspected what the changes in her body meant. She stood at the wash basin, fighting a wave of nausea that had become increasingly familiar over the past weeks. Her monthly courses, never regular since James's death, had stopped entirely. Her breasts were tender, her appetite strange. She gripped the basin's edge, mind racing. Clara, Eli appeared in the doorway, concern etching his features. You're pale again. I'm fine, she said automatically, then reconsidered. They'd promised honesty between them. Actually, Eli, I think I'm with child. The words hung in the air. Eli went very still, his face unreadable. You're certain? As certain as I can be without a doctor. She turned to face him fully. The signs are all there. He crossed to her in 2 strides, hands hovering near her shoulders as if afraid to touch. A child. Our child. Yes. She searched his face. Are you angry? Angry? He seemed genuinely puzzled. Why would I be angry? This was never meant to be that kind of marriage. We were forced together, and now... He silenced her with a kiss, gentle but thorough. When they parted, his hands cupped her face. We chose each other, remember? Every day since that night in the cave, we've chosen this. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. A child. Clara, I never thought I'd have this, any of this. You're happy? Terrified, he admitted. But yes, happy. Are you? She leaned into his touch. Yes, though I'm frightened too. Childbirth out here, with no doctor nearby. We'll manage. Women have been having babies on the frontier since there was a frontier. But she could see her worry reflected in his eyes. Word spread as word always did in small communities. Clara couldn't hide the morning sickness forever, nor the way Eli had become even more protective, if such a thing were possible. The women who supported her school were delighted, bringing advice and remedies. The town council maintained disapproving silence, though Clara caught Reverend Thompson watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. It was Sarah Patterson who brought the warning. She arrived on a clear April morning, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by worry. Clara, there's talk in town. There's always talk, Clara said, pouring tea with hands that had finally stopped shaking each morning. This is different. Some are saying the baby isn't Eli's. That it's from before, from when Pete and Jed. Clara's cup rattled against the saucer. That's a vicious lie. I know that. Anyone with eyes knows how you and Eli are together. But Thompson's been spreading poison, saying the timing is suspicious, that you trapped Eli with another man's child. Let me guess, Eli said from the doorway, voice dangerously quiet. He thinks this proves Clara's immorality, gives them another reason to close the school. Sarah nodded miserably. I'm sorry. I thought you should know. After Sarah left, Clara sat in numb silence. To have this joy tainted by such ugliness, it was almost more than she could bear. Maybe I should stop teaching, she said quietly, for the baby's sake. No. Eli knelt before her, taking her hands. You stop now. They win. They prove that their lies have power over truth. But if they're saying such things about our child, then we prove them wrong by living well, by raising our child to know right from wrong, truth from lies. His jaw set. And if anyone says such things to my face, they'll answer for it. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Clara was teaching in the barn. She had 8 students now, their parents brave enough to defy gossip, when she heard raised voices outside. She stepped out to find Eli facing Pete and Jed, with several townsmen watching from a safe distance. Heard you're gonna be a papa, Pete sneered. He'd been drinking, though it was barely noon. Must be nice, raising another man's brat. Eli's stillness was more frightening than any threat. You have 3 seconds to take that back. Or what? You'll shoot us in front of witnesses? Jed was drunk too, made bold by liquor and audience. Everyone knows what really happened that night, how she was all disheveled, clothes torn. You just took our leavings. He never finished. Eli moved with the sudden violence of a man who'd learned to strike first in prison. Pete went down with a broken nose. Jed lasted 2 seconds longer before Eli's fist found his jaw. Both men lay groaning in the dirt. Anyone else? Eli asked the watching crowd. Anyone else want to say my wife is anything less than a lady? That my child is anything less than mine? Silence. Then Walter Hutchins stepped forward. You can't beat the whole town. Dalton, I can try. Eli's voice carried the flat certainty of a man with nothing left to lose. Any man who speaks against my wife or child will answer to me. Spread the word. Eli, Clara said softly. She'd moved to his side without his noticing. That's enough. They're not worth it. He looked down at her, saw her hand pressed protectively over her still flat stomach, and the killing rage faded slightly. But his words to the crowd remained hard. My wife is a good woman, better than this town deserves. Anyone who says otherwise is a liar and a coward. He took Clara's arm and led her back to the barn, where wide-eyed students pretended they hadn't been watching through cracks. Behind them, men helped Pete and Jed to their feet, muttering among themselves. You shouldn't have done that, Clara said once they were alone. Yes, I should have done it weeks ago. He touched her face gently, the same hands that had just dealt violence now infinitely tender. I won't let them hurt you with their poison. Not you. Not our child. That night, Clara woke to find Eli's hand spread protectively over her stomach. Can't feel anything yet? She murmured. I know, just making sure it's real. She covered his hand with hers. What kind of life will we give a child out here, with the town against us, with everything so hard? A honest life, he said. A life where they know they're loved, where they learn to read and write and think for themselves, where they see their parents stand up for what's right. You make it sound simple. It is simple, not easy, but simple. He pulled her closer. We'll teach them what you teach your students, that the world is bigger than small minds and petty fears. That's a good life. Clara, better than most. The gossip continued. Of course, but something had shifted after Eli's confrontation. The lies were whispered more quietly, and several families who'd been wavering sent their children to Clara's school. Even some who disagreed with her teaching methods respected the way the Daltons stood together against adversity. Spring warmed into early summer. Clara's pregnancy progressed, her body changing in ways that fascinated and frightened her. Eli read every medical text they could acquire, questioned every woman who'd borne children, prepared with the focused intensity he brought to everything that mattered. One evening in late May, as Clara taught Eli more advanced writing, he'd progressed remarkably under her tutelage. A single rider approached. Both tensed until they recognized Dr. Marcus Taylor from the county seat. Mrs. Dalton, the doctor said, tipping his hat. Heard you might be needing medical attention in the coming months. Who sent you? Eli asked suspiciously. Judge Craddock mentioned it. Said there was a teacher out here doing good work who might need help. The doctor smiled. I make rounds every few weeks. Thought I'd add you to my route, if that's acceptable. Clara nearly cried with relief. More than acceptable. Doctor, please, come in. The examination was brief, but thorough. Everything seems normal. Doctor, Taylor announced. You're healthy. The baby's position is good. I'd say late September, early October. A harvest baby? Clara murmured. Indeed. I'll be back in a month to check on you. Meanwhile, these herbs will help with the sickness, and this tonic will build your strength. He packed his bag, then paused. Mrs. Dalton, I should warn you, there's talk in town about requiring certification for teachers, official credentials from an approved institution. I studied at Philadelphia Normal School. Clara said, but do you have documentation? Because without it, he let the implication hang. After he left, Clara sank into a chair. They never stop, do they? Always finding new ways to attack. Then we find new ways to fight, Eli said. Write to your school. Get the papers. It could take months. And if they refuse, or if the records were lost, then we'll handle it when it happens. He knelt before her, hands on her knees. Clara, you're tired. The baby, the teaching, fighting the town. It's too much. I can't stop. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking you to rest, to let me carry more of the load. His gray eyes were serious. I failed to protect people before. In the war, in prison. I won't fail you. You've never failed me. Clara protested. Let me do this. Let me fight these battles while you grow our child. That's partnership, isn't it? Sharing the burdens. Clara studied his scarred face, seeing not the dangerous man the town feared, but the gentle one who held her through nightmares, who learned letters to make her smile, who'd transformed from reluctant stranger to devoted husband. All right, she agreed. But Eli? No more violence unless absolutely necessary. I don't want our child born into bloodshed. He nodded. I'll try. But if they come for you or the baby, I know. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. I know. That night, as had become their custom, Eli read aloud while Clara sewed tiny clothes from scraps. His reading had improved dramatically, and he chose from her books carefully. Poetry when she was peaceful, adventure stories when she was restless. Hope is the thing with feathers, he read, that perches in the soul. Emily Dickinson. Clara murmured, I met her once at a reading in Boston. Such a strange, brilliant woman. And sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all. Eli looked up. Do you think that's true? That hope never stops? Clara's hands paused in their sewing. I think hope is like spring. It might get buried under snow, might seem dead for a while, but it always comes back. She smiled. You came back. We came back. Both of us. He set the book aside and moved to sit beside her. What do you hope for the baby? Health, happiness, a world that's kinder than the one we've known. She leaned into him. You? That they're like you, strong, brave, too stubborn to let the world break them. And if they're like you, quiet and watchful and fierce when protecting what they love, then God help anyone who tries to hurt them, Eli said simply. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked over the gentle swell where their child grew. Outside, night sounds filled the air, an owl hunting, coyotes calling across the ridges, the eternal wind in the pines. Inside, hope perched in the rafters of their rough cabin, singing its wordless tune. The town might gossip, the council might scheme, but here, in this moment, they had each other and the promise of new life. It was more than either had dared dream when they spoke their forced vows in that cold church. Now those vows had become truth, transformed by choice and challenge and the quiet courage of daily love. And that, Clara thought as she felt the first flutter of movement within her womb, was its own kind of miracle. Summer bloomed full across the Wyoming territory, painting the meadows with wildflowers and warming the mountain winds. Clara's belly rounded with new life, and with it came an unexpected shift in the town's attitude. Some who had been cold began to nod in passing. A few even offered quiet congratulations when their paths crossed at the general store. The change became clear the day Martha Brennan arrived with a proposal. We want you back, she said simply. In town, teaching properly. Clara set down her tea carefully, aware of Eli tensing beside her. The council doesn't speak for everyone. We've gathered signatures, 43 families who want their children educated. Tom Patterson found an old town statute that allows for a community-appointed teacher if enough citizens petition. Martha smiled. We have enough. Where would I teach? Clara asked, trying to contain her hope. The old meeting hall behind the bank. It's dusty but sound. The men are already planning repairs. Martha glanced at Eli. That is, if your husband approves. My wife makes her own decisions, Eli said. But I'd want to see this hall, make sure it's safe. And so, on a blazing July morning, Clara stood in what would become Dry Creek's first official schoolhouse. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The space was large enough for 30 students, with room for a proper blackboard and even a small library corner. It's perfect, she breathed. It needs work, Eli observed, but she could see him mentally cataloging improvements. Better locks, a stove for winter, shelves for books. Tom Patterson cleared his throat. There's one condition. The council insisted. You need to provide your teaching credentials. Prove you're qualified. Clara's heart sank. She'd written to Philadelphia weeks ago, but received no response. I'm waiting for documents. Then we wait with you. Sarah Patterson interrupted. School doesn't need to start until September anyway. That gives us time. Over the following weeks, the transformation began. Men who'd once eyed Eli with suspicion now worked alongside him, rebuilding benches and patching the roof. Women who'd whispered behind Clara's back now brought curtains for the windows and donated precious books. It wasn't everyone. Reverend Thompson maintained stony disapproval, and Walter Hutchins forbade his children from attending. But it was enough. Why the change? Clara asked Sarah one afternoon as they organized supplies. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Partly it's you and Eli, the way you've stood together, faced everything down. People respect that, even if they don't admit it. She paused. But mostly it's the children. Annie Morrison can read now, really read. Young Tom Turner's doing arithmetic that stumps his father. Parents see that and want it for their own. Clara felt tears threaten. These pregnancy emotions caught her at unexpected moments. I never meant to cause such division in the town. Division was already here, Sarah said firmly, between those who fear change and those who embrace it. You just brought it to the surface. That evening, Clara found Eli building something in the barn, lengths of pine taking shape under his hands. What is it? Cradle, he said without looking up. Baby needs somewhere to sleep. She ran her fingers over the smooth wood. It's beautiful. It's functional. But she saw the care in every joint, the hours spent sanding until no splinter could threaten tender skin. Eli? She waited until he looked at her. Are you happy? Truly. He set down his tools, considering. Never thought I'd be a father. Never thought I'd be a husband again after. He trailed off, but she knew he meant the life destroyed by war. But yes, I'm happy. Scared as hell, but happy. What scares you? Everything. That I won't be good enough. That the nightmares will frighten the baby. That I'll fail you both somehow. He pulled her close, hands spreading over her belly. That this is too good to last. Nothing lasts forever, Clara said softly. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't cherish what we have now. The baby kicked, strong enough that Eli felt it. His eyes widened with wonder. Was that your child saying hello? Clara placed his hands where the movement was strongest. He's active today. He or she, but something tells me it's a boy. She smiled at his expression. A son to teach all those things fathers teach sons. I don't know those things, Eli admitted. My father died when I was 12. Everything I learned after that was about surviving, not living. Then you'll learn together. Clara said, Isn't that what we've been doing? Learning to live instead of just survive. That night, nature provided its own lesson in survival. Clara woke to pain, not the gentle discomfort she'd grown accustomed to, but sharp, frightening cramps. Eli! He was instantly alert. What's wrong? Something's... Oh God, the baby! Something's wrong! Terror, unlike anything he'd felt in battle, flooded through Eli. He lit every lamp, helped Clara to a chair. There was blood, not much, but any was too much. I'm riding for the doctor, he said. It's the middle of the night. The roads... I don't care. He was already pulling on boots. Sarah Patterson lives closer. I'll get her first, then ride for Doctor Taylor. Eli, don't leave me alone. The fear in her voice stopped him. He knelt before her, taking her hands. I have to get help. Then hurry, she whispered. Please hurry. The ride to the Patterson farm was the longest few minutes of Eli's life. He pounded on their door until Tom answered, rifle in hand. Clara needs Sarah. The baby. Something's wrong. Sarah appeared, already reaching for her shawl. Tom, ride for Dr. Taylor. I'll go with Mr. Dalton. Back at the cabin, Sarah took charge with calm efficiency. She examined Clara gently, asked careful questions. The bleeding stopped. She announced, That's good, and I can feel the baby moving. But the pain sometimes happens, body's way of saying slow down. Sarah helped Clara back to bed. You've been doing too much. The school preparations, the teaching, the house. You need rest. But no buts. Bed rest for at least a week. Let that baby settle. Sarah's voice brooked no argument. Eli, she's not to lift anything heavier than a teacup. Understood? Eli nodded, relief making him weak. Understood. Dr. Taylor arrived at dawn, confirming Sarah's diagnosis. The baby's fine. He assured them. Strong heartbeat, good position, but Mrs. Dalton, you must rest. This is your body's warning. The week that followed tested them both. Clara, forced to stillness, fretted about the school preparations. Eli, forced to watch her fret, wore a path in the floor with his pacing. But slowly, as days passed without further scares, they found a rhythm. Eli brought her books, her sewing, reports from the school preparation. Clara directed from bed, teaching him organizational systems, sharing lesson plans. You'd make a good teacher yourself, she told him one evening as he correctly solved a complex arithmetic problem. No patience for it, he said, except with you. By week's end, Doctor. Taylor pronounced her improved, but cautioned continued care. Clara returned to light activities, but Eli watched her like a hawk, carrying anything remotely heavy, insisting she rest every hour. August arrived with a letter from Philadelphia, her teaching credentials, official and notarized. Clara cried when she read them, hormones and relief overwhelming her. It's real. They can't deny this. The school opening was set for September 2nd. As the date approached, enrollment exceeded expectations. 22 students, ranging from age 5 to 15. Even some who'd opposed Clara initially had quietly added their children's names. The night before opening, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at the window, one hand on her belly, watching stars wheel overhead. Nervous? Eli asked, joining her. Terrified. What if I can't do it? What if the baby comes early? What if it's wonderful? He interrupted. What if those children learn to read and write and think? What if our child grows up seeing their mother change lives? Clara leaned back against him. When did you become an optimist? When a stubborn schoolteacher taught me to hope. Opening day dawned crisp and clear. Clara dressed carefully in her best dress, let out to accommodate her expanding middle, and Eli drove her to town in the wagon. Parents and children had already gathered, excitement and apprehension mingling in the air. Reverend Thompson stood across the street, watching with disapproval. But Judge Craddock was there too, and Marshal Whelan. And most importantly, eager children clutching new slates and worn primers. Welcome, Clara said, standing before them all. Welcome to Dry Creek School. The day was a blur of names learned, supplies distributed, first lessons taught. Clara's back ached and her feet swelled, but joy carried her through. These children wanted to learn, and she would teach them. When the last student left, Clara sank into her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. Eli appeared with water and a cloth for her face. How do you feel? He asked. Like I could conquer the world. She laughed. Or at least teach it to read. Good, because you have 22 students expecting you tomorrow. That night, they celebrated quietly. A special dinner Eli had prepared. Candles on the table, even a small cake from Martha Brennan. As they danced slowly in their cabin, Clara's belly between them. Eli sang softly, an old song she'd never heard him sing before. I didn't know you could sing, she murmured. Haven't had reason to. Not for years. He spun her gently. My mother used to sing this when I was small. Said it was for blessing new beginnings. We've had quite a few of those, Clara observed. And more coming. His hand spread over where their child rested. You know what I realized today, watching you with those students? What? Our child is going to grow up seeing both parents fight for what matters, seeing education valued, courage demonstrated. He stopped dancing, framed her face with his hands. That's a legacy worth leaving. Clara kissed him, long and sweet. I love you, Eli Dalton. Have I told you that today? Only 3 times. I was beginning to worry. She laughed, swatting his arm. Come to bed, you impossible man. Your very pregnant wife needs rest if she's to conquer the world tomorrow. As they settled for sleep, the baby kicked strongly. Active tonight, Eli murmured, hand protective over the movement. Excited about school starting. Clara suggested, can't blame him. Or her. Clara agreed. Outside, autumn whispered its approach in the cooling breeze. Inside, 2 people who'd been forced together by others' fears had built something beautiful from that harsh beginning. A school, a life, a family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were still those in town who disapproved, still battles to fight for acceptance and respect. Clara's pregnancy advanced toward its conclusion, bringing its own fears and hopes. But tonight, in their lamplit cabin, none of that mattered. What mattered was the soft sound of Eli's breathing, the flutter of new life under Clara's heart, the books waiting on shelves for eager young minds, and the precious, hard-won piece of a love that had grown in the most unlikely ground. The candle burned low, casting dancing shadows. Clara pressed closer to Eli's warmth, felt his arms tighten around her in sleep. Tomorrow they would face the world again, its prejudices, its challenges, its surprising graces. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. In her belly, the baby turned and settled, as if finding the perfect position for the journey ahead. Clara smiled in the darkness, hand covering Eli's where it rested protectively over their child. "Sweet dreams, little one," she whispered. "You're coming into a world full of possibilities." And with that blessing spoken into the night, she too settled into dreams of chalk dust and children's laughter, of a scarred man learning to smile again, of hope taking root in the most unlikely soil and blooming despite every attempt to crush it. The school was ready. The students were eager. Her husband stood guard against any who would threaten what they'd built, and under her heart, their child grew strong. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. September painted the valley in shades of gold and amber, and with it came the rhythm of established routine. Clara's school thrived despite continued resistance from some quarters. Each morning, Eli drove her to town, watched her disappear into the schoolhouse, then spent his days working, sometimes for wages at nearby ranches, sometimes improving their own small homestead. Each evening, he was waiting when the last student left, ready to drive his increasingly heavy wife home. The baby was due any day now. Doctor. Taylor had visited twice in the past week, pronouncing everything progressing normally, but Eli's watchfulness had intensified to the point where Clara found it both touching and mildly exasperating. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one evening as he insisted on carrying even her small teaching satchel. "Humor me," he replied. "Won't be long now before you can carry whatever you please." That night, Clara felt the first real contraction just after midnight. She lay still, timing it, not wanting to wake Eli for false labor. But when the second came, stronger, she knew. "Eli," she shook his shoulder gently. "It's time." He was instantly awake, lamp-lit, already reaching for clothes. "I'll get Sarah, then ride for the doctor." "There's time," Clara assured him, though another contraction made her breath catch. "But yes, get Sarah." The hours that followed blurred together. Sarah's calm presence, Eli's barely controlled anxiety, Dr. Taylor's eventual arrival as dawn broke. Clara had helped at birthings before, knew the theory, but experiencing it herself was altogether different. The pain was immense, primal, but between contractions she felt powerful, connected to every woman who'd ever brought life into the world. "You're doing beautifully," Sarah encouraged. "Not long now." Eli hadn't left her side, letting her grip his hand through each wave of pain. His face was pale, the scar standing out starkly, but his voice remained steady as he murmured encouragement. "I can see the head. Doctor," Taylor announced. One more push. "Mrs. Dalton." And then, with a final effort that drew from reserves Clara didn't know she possessed, their child entered the world. The baby's cry, strong and indignant, was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "It's a boy." "Doctor," Taylor said, cleaning the infant efficiently before placing him in Clara's arms. "A healthy son." Clara looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Eli's hand shook as he touched the baby's head, wonder replacing anxiety on his face. "He's so small. He'll grow," Clara promised, then gasped. Oh no. What's wrong?" Eli's panic returned instantly. "Nothing's wrong, Doctor," Taylor said calmly, examining her. "But it seems your son has a sibling. There's another baby coming." The shock of it, twins, when they'd never suspected, rendered everyone momentarily speechless. Then Sarah laughed. "Well, that explains why you were so large." "Clara, you're having twins!" The second birth came faster, as if this baby was eager to join its brother. 20 minutes later, a daughter's cry joined her brother's. "Two," Eli said faintly. We have two, a boy and a girl. Clara marveled. A baby in each arm. Eli, we have twins. He sank to his knees beside the bed, touching each tiny head with irreverent fingers. They're perfect. You're perfect. His voice broke. I didn't know I could feel this much. They named them James Hope Dalton, James for Clara's first husband. Hope for what they'd found together, and Faith Elizabeth Dalton, because Faith had carried them through when nothing else could. The news spread through Dry Creek like wildfire. Twins were rare enough to be noteworthy, and the circumstances of the Daltons' marriage added extra spice to the gossip. But something had shifted in the town's perception. Perhaps it was the school's obvious success, or the way Eli had integrated into the community through his work, or simply the passage of time softening hard feelings. Whatever the reason, gifts began arriving. Knitted blankets, tiny clothes, preserved foods for the new parents. Even Reverend Thompson's wife appeared one afternoon with a basket. Twins are a blessing, she said stiffly. God's way of showing abundance. Clara, exhausted from feeding two infants, managed a gracious thank you. After the woman left, she looked at Eli. Did that just happen? Maybe they're finally running out of things to disapprove of, he suggested. The first weeks were a blur of feedings, changings, and precious little sleep. Eli proved remarkably adept with the babies, his large hands gentle as he rocked them through fussy nights. Clara watched him singing softly to Faith one evening, the same lullaby he'd sung while she was pregnant, and felt her heart might burst with love. You're good at this, she told him. They're easy to love, he replied, then looked at her. Like their mother. Clara had to take a month away from teaching, leaving Sarah Patterson and young Annie Morrison, now 17 and eager to follow in Clara's footsteps, to manage the school. But by November, she was back, often with one or both babies in a basket beside her desk. The students were enchanted by their teachers' children, and lessons in reading often included soft lullabies to quiet, fussy infants. One snowy December afternoon, as Clara taught arithmetic while Faith slept in her basket, Mayor Garrett appeared at the schoolhouse door. Clara tensed, but his expression was thoughtful rather than antagonistic. Mrs. Dalton, might I have a word? She stepped outside, wrapping her shawl tighter. Mayor Garrett, I've come to apologize, he said, the words clearly difficult. For the way things began, the forced marriage. It wasn't right. Clara studied him. No, it wasn't. But Eli and I have made our peace with it, and made something good from something wrong, he acknowledged. The school, your family. You've brought something valuable to Dry Creek, even if some of us were too stubborn to see it at first. What are you saying, Mayor? I'm saying the town council took a vote. We want to make your position official, salaried teacher of Dry Creek School. If you'll accept, Clara felt tears threaten. Yes, I accept. Good. He cleared his throat. And Mrs. Dalton, your husband, he's a good man. We misjudged him too. That evening, Clara shared the news with Eli as they sat by the fire, each holding a baby, an official position, she marveled, with a salary. You earned it, Eli said simply. Fought for it and won. We fought for it, she corrected. None of this would have happened without you. He was quiet for a moment, watching James wave tiny fists in the air. I got a letter today, he said eventually. From my brother. First contact in 8 years. Eli, what did he say? He's in California, has a ranch. Heard about us somehow. The marriage, the babies, the school. Wants to know if we'd visit. Clara reached over to touch his hand. Do you want to? Maybe, someday, when the babies are older. He looked at her. Would you come, leave Dry Creek? I'd go anywhere with you. Clara said, but this is home now. This is where we became us. Then we stay. Eli agreed. Until we decide otherwise. Together. Spring came again, as it always did, melting snow and bringing new growth. The twins thrived, already showing distinct personalities, James thoughtful and quiet like his father, Faith bold and curious like her mother. The school expanded to 30 students, requiring Annie Morrison to be hired as an assistant teacher. On their second wedding anniversary, the real one, not the forced ceremony, but the night in the cave when they'd chosen each other, Eli surprised Clara with a gift. "What's this?" She unwrapped the package carefully, gasping at what lay inside. "Eli, it's beautiful." It was a leather journal, hand-tooled with her initials. Inside the front cover, he'd written in his careful script, "For your thoughts, your dreams, and our story. With love, E." "I thought you might want to write it down," he said. "Everything that's happened, so the babies will know someday." Clara threw her arms around him. "It's perfect. You're perfect." "Far from it," he laughed. "But I'm yours." That night, as the twins slept and spring rain pattered on the roof, Clara made the first entry in her journal. 2 years ago, I was forced to marry a stranger. Today, I cannot imagine life without him. We who were trapped have found freedom together. We who were broken have built something whole. Our children will grow up seeing that love isn't always pretty or easy, but it's always worth fighting for. She looked up to find Eli reading over her shoulder. "That's good," he said. "True. Our truth," she agreed. Outside, the rain continued, nourishing the earth for new growth. Inside, a family that had begun in coercion and continued through defiance rested in the peace of chosen love. The twins stirred in their cradles, making soft baby sounds. Clara reached for Eli's hand, intertwining their fingers. "No regrets?" she asked, as she did sometimes. "Only one," he said, and her heart skipped until he continued. "That it took so long to find you," she laughed, swatting him gently. "Impossible romantic. Practical schoolteacher," he countered. "Former drifter. Stubborn woman. Scarred protector. Beautiful mother." They could have continued indefinitely, this litany of what they'd been and what they'd become. Instead, Clara rose and held out her hand. "Dance with me?" "No music," Eli pointed out. "There's always music." Clara said, "Listen." And there was. The rain's rhythm, the wind's melody, the bass note of their sleeping children's breathing, the harmony of two hearts beating in time. They danced in their cabin, careful not to wake the twins, holding each other in the lamplight. Two souls who'd found home in the most unlikely place, each other's arms. From a forced marriage to a chosen love, from a threatened school to a thriving institution, from bitter loneliness to abundant family. They'd traveled far without ever leaving Dry Creek, and their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, children to raise, minds to shape, perhaps even that visit to California someday. But they would face it all as they'd learned to face everything, together. The candle burned low. The rain gentled to a whisper in their cradles. James and Faith slept on, dreaming baby dreams of milk and warmth and loving voices. And in their bed, Clara and Eli held each other close, no longer the strangers who'd spoken reluctant vows, but partners who'd chosen to write a different story than the one the world had tried to force upon them. It was, Clara thought as sleep claimed her, a very good story indeed, one worth preserving, one worth sharing, one worth living, day by chosen day, for all the years to come. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening while driving through your own frontier? Or perhaps cozied up at home? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Clara and Eli's journey. Your comments mean the world to us, and I can't wait to hear what touched your heart in this story of forced beginnings and chosen love.